Pullium on the left-hand side, of course joined by Andrew Ellenbogen, Pro Tour champion, on the right-hand side. As you can see, Will Pullium playing a Sultai list, also featuring Hadana's Climb. We didn't mention that when we were talking before. He's looking to get some value out of getting some tokens onto his creatures and making those big, huge flying attacks.
Hadana's Climb, obviously a very good combo with Incubation Druid, too.
Of course. So Pullium has led with a tapped black land, and Ellenbogen right out the gates with the Sky Marcher Aspirant, looking to do some damage.
Wild Growth Walker, definitely one of the most important cards in this matchup. It's going to give Will a lot of time to just build up his mana base, draw some cards, eventually land a couple giant Hydroid Crassuses to kind of take over the game.
Well, fast and furious, Andrew Ellenbogen has continued to establish his board with an Adanto Vanguard. Meanwhile, we have Will Pullium dropping Jade Light Ranger, gaining some life courtesy of Wild Growth Walker, two of the best friends in the entire format, and solidifying his defensive position a little bit, making sure he can effectively block on the ground.
Yeah, and Ellenbogen doesn't have a whole lot of ways to get through a start like this. Normally you see a lot of things like Conclave Tribunal, which Ellenbogen does have, but they also have like a lot of various pump things like Heroic Reinforcements. But since Ellenbogen is Azorius instead of Boros, he doesn't have access to that. Instead, he's just trying to clear the way with things like Deputive Detention.
Correct. Deputy Detention, really a good way out of any kind of large blockers you may face. But here we see a pump effect in the form of Venerated Loxodon, joined, of course, by Snubhorn Sentry on Andrew Ellenbogen's side of the board.
And the real question is that going to be enough? Because Wild Growth Walker getting to untap with it twice, it's just going to keep growing and growing.
Of course, and also continue to pad Will's life total. And there we see a second copy of Wild Growth Walker joining Will's side of the battlefield, along with Merfolk Branch Walker. The counters and the life continue to flow all over the battlefield. Will Pullium quickly climbing to a robust 32 life.
32 is a lot.
That's a lot against this Azorius aggro deck.
These aggro decks are really good at dealing 20, but I don't know. Once your life starts climbing, it just gives you those turns to make those land drops, and eventually I would assume that something big is going to come from Will. Either it's a Hydroid Crassus or a Fine Finality to just sweep the board and reset everything.
Yeah, and I think this foundation that we're seeing right now is exactly why players have entered week one so keen still on the Golgari-based archetypes. Having access to Wild Growth Walker along with Merfolk Branch Walker and Jade Light Ranger is going to clean up a lot of problems against aggressive decks and give you time to get to these big new flashy spells.
Right. And taking a deck that was good in the last season and just playing it after a new set comes out is normally fine. Like, how bad can it be? But in this case, Golgari actually just got a bunch of new tools too. So it might just be one of those things where, like, you were hoping that Golgari would kind of fall out of favor because you're kind of sick of seeing it, but it might just be here to stay.
Yeah, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think this is a player in the format. So Andrew Ellenbogen has put a Legion's Landing into play, perhaps looking to get wider than Will Pullium can manage. It's going to take a lot. He's got a pretty established board presence over there on the left-hand side of your screen. But Ellenbogen's going to try, and here's another pump effect we forgot about, Benelish Marshall making his team a little bit larger.
So the two combined definitely help, and now with the Star City's blessing, Ellenbogen has the ability to go to the air with the Sky Marcher Aspirant, but he's got a lot of work to do.
Ton of work to do, and this is where it starts, though. He has to establish that board presence, get a little wider, make creatures a little bigger, and maybe he can start finding some favorable attacks to start knocking down that already tremendous life total of Will Pullium. Yeah,
so Bill is basically looking for a Crassus or a Hadana's Climb, something that can actually, start getting to work, maybe block these flyers, and just give him like this late game engine to kind of build towards.
Yeah, and we're still pretty early in the game, despite the level of board presence we see on both sides of the table. Only 4 lands for each player, so we're not looking at a huge Crassus yet. And look at this. Andrew Ellenbogen says, I am not afraid to get in there. Going to trade some creatures away here probably, but still looking to make just a very large attack and start chipping away at that huge life total of Will Pullium.
This 4/6 Wild Growth Walker is not scary, he says.
Yeah, pretty bold statement. Will Pullium figuring out his blocks here. Hands already on head, deep in the tank. What do you think about Ellenbogen getting aggressive here? I mean, obviously he's giving away some creatures, but this is what he's got to do, right? If he's going to take this game down, he needs to start looking for inroads.
Well, it's actually not that bad for him because the Aspirant is flying. the Adanto Vanguard, you can just pay 4 life.
Sure.
And then you have like Venerated Loxodon and Snubhorn Sentry, which aren't going to get eaten straight up by the 4/6 Wild Growth Walkers. So Will's going to have to double block to kill either one of those creatures. And then at least you're still trading 1 for 1. And then you have Legion's Landing active alongside Benelish Marshals. So
right.
I think this is correct. You don't get to win a Pro Tour with a white aggro deck without knowing how to do combat, you know?
Correct. And Andrew Ellenbogen looks like he found a great attack here to start penetrating Will's defense. A little bit of trading is going to happen, but I do think Ellenbogen's going to come out ahead in this exchange.
Still not piercing that life total as much as he would like, I'm sure, but just being able to trade some stuff off also makes it a lot harder for the Sultai deck to stabilize and then proceed to turn the corner. You know, like now Will is going to have fewer things left to actually clock Ellenbogen with also.
Correct. Future fine finalities are a little bit less meaningful, but I just saw a draw there, and it looked like a double face card, and that means Hadana's Climb.
Ooh.
Maybe looking to get through the skies here, possibly with that large Wild Growth Walker if Will Pullium thinks he can get to a safe position. Taps 5 mana. Instead, it's going to be Vivian Reed, and Vivian Reed is going to deal with that Sky Marcher Aspirant taken off the board by the minus ability, of course.
So now 2 blockers left to protect the Vivian. Ellenbogen's untapping with 3 attackers. Probably don't want to be sending in the Benelish Marshal because that's just going to get eaten. So it doesn't look like Ellenbogen has great attacks this turn.
Yeah, it could be Will's finding a way to establish his defenses, and then we'll look to ride the card advantage from Vivian Reed as we carry on to future turns.
Yeah, and Vivian is one of these late game engines that I was talking about. The early game stuff from Sultai basically just help make your land drops, add a little bit of consistency to your deck, and then it's Vivian, Hadana's Climb, or Hydroid Crassus that is effectively going to win the game for you.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the greatest pulls to these Golgari-based decks, is just getting such an effective, really smoother to their early game. Early game goes smooth as butter every time. You're finding your lands with your Jade Light Ranger, you're making your drops with Merfolk Branchwalker's assistance, and just getting to the point where you can start doing powerful things like Vivian Reed. And we can see it sent Andrew pretty deep into the tank here. It's tapping 3 mana. It's going to be a second Benelish Marshal joining the battlefield for Andrew.
If you would like to play 4 rounds of Legacy,
and he's willing to send in with the Vanguard now carrying 6 power along with it.
That is the magic number.
last call for 130 Legacy.
Will faced with a difficult decision here. He has to decide if he wants to throw away one of his creatures in order to preserve his Vivian Reed, and he is going to do so. Follow-up play of a Haunted Witness from Andrew, and the board presence continues to get wider. This is a tight race right now. I think both players have a shot at winning this game.
Yeah, I think so too. Ellenbogen is in a slightly better spot right now, but not being able to get the Vivian off the battlefield is pretty dangerous. Likely just going to find another Explore creature like it does in Merfolk Branchwalker to make that Wild Growth Walker bigger, and then potentially get out of range of the Adano Vanguard. But as soon as Will finds like a fine finality, for example, I think the game is basically just over.
That sounds correct. That would clean up the entire board on Andrew's side, and that's obviously what he's looking for right now. 3 copies of fine finality in Will's deck, so he has a chance of getting it any turn now. He continues to search, but in the meantime, he's going to buff up his Wild Growth Walker one more time. Now looking at a 5/7 Wild Growth Walker. What's the biggest Wild Growth Walker you remember ever having in play?
Having in play?
Yeah.
Myself?
Yeah.
1/3?
Oh, come on.
I don't think that I've played the card very often.
You're missing out. Wild Growth Walker is an absolute delight.
You know, I really don't think I am.
Not a Jerry Thompson approved card. So here we see Hadana's Climb making Wild Growth Walker even larger, the 5th counter now on Wild Growth Walker. And that, of course, is going to flip the Hadana's Climb to its backside. Another Merfolk Branchwalker joining the team. More points for the Wild Growth Walker. And that's going to reveal a Jade Light Ranger for future buffs to the Wild Growth Walker. There you see the backside of Hadana's Climb. Winged Temple of Orizaka Transform from Hadana's Climb. Tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. 1 colorless, green, blue, tap. Target creature you control gains flying and gets +X until end of turn, where X is its power. It's not going to take much for that Wild Growth Walker to become a lethal threat with the help of the Wing Temple.
No, with Will at 27 life, Ellenbogen at 18, this is a very easy 2-turn clock, and it might just be possible that Will can jump the Wild Growth Walker for 2 turns in a row while just chump blocking with random explore creatures.
I could see that. Andrew may be on the search for an answer here. So we're going to see an attack here from Andrew once more. We have Hunted Witness, a token, as well as a Danto Vanguard. Let's not forget we have some life linkers on the battlefield in the form of that token. Could gain Andrew some life to maybe buy him a little bit more time.
And it's pretty nice that both the token and the Hunted Witness are 3 power thanks to the Benelish Marshal, so no matter what, it's going to clean up the rest of the Branch Walkers.
Yes.
A Dano Vanguard into the Wild Growth Walker is not ideal. You pay 4 life and they bounce, but Ellenbogen is doing all that he can to reduce the amount of resources that Will has to work with, and he's desperately trying to fight to get this Vivian off the board.
Correct. Yeah, here you see the switch maybe punishing Andrew a little bit. If he had access to something like Heroic Reinforcements, there may be some more options available to him. He may be playing to some more outs. Going to this blue splash instead relying on Deputy of Detention and post-board negates and things like that, leaves him a little bit vulnerable in these type of situations, although Deputy of Detention would be quite a fine draw here.
Yeah, that's basically what I was going to say, is like if you're cutting reinforcements for deputies and you have a deputy here, either you take out the giant Wild Growth Walker and that solves the Hadana's Climb problem, it solves the blocking the Adano Vanguard problem. Like, deputy looks completely great here.
It does. So we have a 9-power Wild Growth Walker. We have Andrew at 17. We have an activation, and that is going to be it. The huge Wild Growth Walker will carry the day, flying through the air, disposing of Andrew Ellenbogen. Wow.
Not the way you normally expect Golgari decks to win, right? Like, you're used to having them have to play a Carnage Tyrant, clear up the battlefield a little bit, and then just like slowly chip them away. But I think these blue cards do a lot to add to the closing speed.
Yeah, in general, things don't come that easy, but Hadana's Climb was an absolute house there. Let's take a look at the sideboards here. We'll start with Will Pullium's side. So he's looking at 3 Duress, 2 Thrashing Brontodon, 2 Disdainful Stroke, 2 Negate, 2 Cry of the Carnarium, 1 Hostage Taker, 1 Vraska Relic Seeker, 1 Assassin's Trophy, and 1 Moment of Craving. Jerry, what do you like out of Will's sideboard here?
Thrashing Brontodon is generally pretty good, having 4 toughness and being able to take out things like Conclave Tribunal. Moment of Craving almost certainly coming in. The big one, I think, is Cry of the Carnarium. Just being able to not only exile things like Hunted Witness, but you get to remove Adano Vanguard and just kind of clean up the battlefield a little bit.
Yeah, an extra sweeper is certainly something the Sultai deck could benefit from in this matchup. Let's head over to Andrew Ellenbogen's side. You see in his sideboard, he is packing 4 Baffling Ends, 3 Ajani Adversary of Tyrants, 3 Negates, 2 Tocatli Honor Guard. I have a feeling you're going to have something to say about that card. 2 Spell Pierce, and 1 Island in the sideboard to help facilitate that blue splash. So, Jerry, what do you like here?
Leading into Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica, the big thing for these white decks was figuring out how to beat Golgari. And first it was adding some Tocatli Honor Guards. Then it was like, well, those kind of die because Golgari was used to them. They started playing more cast downs and stuff. Then it was adding a Johnny Adversary of Tyrants to bring back the Tocatli Honor Guards. So Ellenbogen's kind of sleeping on this a little bit, only playing 2 Honor Guards in his 75. But if he's ever able to assemble that combination, I feel like it's lights out. And in the meantime, you have things like Baffling End that you can go to in order to remove the big Wild Growth Walkers that was a problem in the first game.
Right, right. So, Jerry, not only is it our first appearance here on the SCG Tour doing commentary, we're also accompanied by some new exciting friends. Personality tokens, Star City Games personality tokens now available. Sets of 5 are included with entry into any Star City Games Open or Classic and any Star City Games order of $20 or more. So collect your set participating in Star City Games Invitational Qualifiers today. Of course, we have the man of the hour, Mr. Jerry Thompson. Look how handsome he looks in that token. How come he chose a soldier?
Because the 1/1 lifelink soldiers at the time, I think, were the most popular tokens. I just want to get on camera. I want to be on the battlefield. I want to be doing work.
Glory Hog, like always. What a surprise.
I'm trying to game the system, man. That's all.
Of course. There we have Mr. Brad Nelson playing an insect on his token here, looking to get into play with who's our big Golgari lord that brings the insects with her.
Azoni Thousand Eye.
Haven't seen much of Azoni lately. Hopefully Brad is at home brewing some sick Azoni decks that he can put himself into the battlefield with. Of course, Miss Janine Compliance recently departed from the Star City ranks to go work with our friends over at Wizards of the Coast. We miss her dearly. Beautiful token nonetheless. She has her spirit token that you can now get with your orders at starcitygames.com. And our co-commentator, Emma Handy, with her shapeshifter token. I love this token. This is a fantastic token.
It is awesome.
Very cool stuff. And then last but not least, we have myself hurling a squirrel at your faces as you look at the screen right now. The Brian Gottlieb token you can get exclusively here through Star City.
Why are you throwing squirrels, man? I don't get it.
Yeah, well, I'm a big squirrel fan. You know, I wanted to reflect that in my token. And I said I didn't want a squirrel that was just like hanging out in the background. I wanted the squirrel to be tough and aggressive because squirrels are ferocious creatures, man.
Yeah,
they can handle their business.
You want that squirrel action shot. But,
yeah.
But then why do you need to be throwing the squirrel? The squirrel can do all that stuff on its own.
It's just a friendly assist. The squirrel's on my team. We work together. The squirrel was ready for that toss, and now he's delivering pain to his adversaries. Trust me, the squirrel's on board with the toss. Don't worry.
Okay, so this is like Colossus throwing Wolverine.
Right,
basically.
right.
Okay,
exact
cool.
same situation. Good analogy. Thank you, Jerry. So players are drawing here for their openers. We're going to have Will take a look at his opener. It looks like maybe Andrew is on a mulligan to 6.
Some flashbacks to the finals of PTGRN where he did not have to mulligan, but his opponent did a few times.
Yeah, I think he would trade some mulligans here for his opponent mulligan in the finals of a Pro Tour. Just guessing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that was the deal he made.
Oh, and it looks like Will's
forward.
going to 6 as well, also reaching back for his deck. So we're going to have a little bit more shuffling here. Jerry, who do you like in the post-board configurations? Do you think one player has an edge now that we've gone to sideboarding?
Well, if Ellenbogen had more honor guards, I would be super happy about his position, even though Will had basically an ideal draw in the first game, at least in the early game, with Wild Growth Walker into Explore creatures. Ellenbogen was still kind of in it. He was building a big battlefield, and it would take a few turns for him to really punch through and everything, thanks to all the life that Will gained, but it wasn't like he was drawing dead or anything.
Sure. Let me propose a alternate sideboard card here. We didn't really discuss it. We talked a lot in that game about how Andrew was in trouble if Will found his fine finality. We talked about Cry of Carnarium being an important card in post-board games. Do you have any interest in Negate post-board possibly? We also saw Vivian do quite a bit of work that game as well.
I would more lean towards something like Spell Pierce, but I think, and Ellenbogen would certainly know better than I would, but I think your best plan is to just be aggressive and disrupt them with things that are also proactive rather than trying to sit back on Spell Pierce or Negate.
Gotcha.
Because the majority of the Sultai deck is still creatures, and while Spell Pierce tags the things that can be important, I think that you're just going to lose percentage points by trying to do that.
Fair enough. So players are out fast and furious on the battlefield. Andrew Ellenbogen with a 1-drop and a 2-drop in the form of Skymarcher Aspirant and the Danto Vanguard. Will Pullium answering on his turn 2 with a Merfolk Branchwalker. Will already fallen to 18 life from an attack from the Aspirant. Andrew looking to make more attacks. Big surprise. And he offers up the trade Skymarcher Aspirant for Merfolk Branchwalker while still getting in for 3, and Will falls to 15.
These are exactly the type of situations where I think after this weekend, possibly, people are going to be playing more Cry of Carnariums.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And a great follow-up from Andrew as well with History of Benalia entering the battlefield and its first night token in accompanying it.
Maybe one of us should have made a night token.
That's a pretty obvious one in retrospect. I'm not bold enough to call myself a knight. I'm much more comfortable identifying with a squirrel than a knight. So that's your wheelhouse.
No, we'll leave that for Reed Duke.
Okay, that's fair. He's the classic magical knight. So Will, considering his options here, already facing a substantial board from Andrew, and his play is Wild Growth Walker, perhaps a turn late. We would have preferred to see that on turn 2 as opposed to the Branch Walker.
Yeah, he played those in the wrong order.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a mistake on his part. Nothing else that could have happened there. So second knight now joins the battlefield, adding to Andrew's forces.
130 Legacy Challenge players, your round 1 pairing.
And surprise, surprise, we have more attacks. Danto Vanguard's going to get through, dealing 3 more damage. Night Token's just going to bounce off the Wild Growth Walker harmlessly, but is gearing up for a big attack next turn when the History of Benalia finally hits its conclusion.
This would be the perfect turn for a Cry of Carnarium, but a Jade Light Ranger will do also.
Missing a second black on Will's side right now. So he may be looking for that, perhaps Cry in hand, who knows. But this is good, getting his Wild Growth Walker a little bigger, and as well as padding that life total a little bit, finding an effective block for this next turn when the Night tokens become 4/3s thanks to History of Benalia.
You see Vivian hit the graveyard off the Explore too, which is probably indicative of what's going on with Will's hand. It's like either short on lands, has enough big cards that he doesn't need Vivian, or is digging for something very specific.
Right. He's also in a defensive posture right now. It's not quite clear that Vivian's going to have an immediate impact, and he may just be struggling for his life by the time his 5th land drop comes.
Entirely possible. So History of Benalia pumps up the Knights to 4 power. Adanto Vanguard still effectively a 3/1 in combat.
Of course, Wild Growth Walker on Will's side of the battlefield, sitting at 3/5, able to make an effective block this turn. We'll see if Andrew has any follow-up to his larger Night tokens. Looks like a 5th land and another History of Benalia. Those running History of Benalias can be tough to deal with on the other side of the battlefield, but Andrew's just going to pass. No attack here, doesn't see any benefit to it. And I agree, that seems like the right call.
Wild Growth Walker proving to be a huge thorn in his side. Definitely need some sort of evasion or some sort of way to actually get that thing out of the way, which might be a case for, the baffling ends that we talked about coming in out of the sideboard. I'm not sure if Ellenbogen decided that he wanted any of those necessarily, but they could be useful.
Yeah, they would be key here for sure. And I mean, we saw a huge Wild Growth Walker carry the last game as well, so I'm coming around to that way of thinking. I think Will's got some options here. I see a Ravenous Chupacabra in hand. I think I see a Vivian creeping along the far left side of his hand there. So he's got the 5th land drop, and his follow-up is going to be Vivian.
So this might be a little bit risky if Ellenbogen seemed like he was very close to attacking next turn potentially, and now got an extra Night token, and Will did not add anything to the battlefield necessarily, so If Ellenbogen wanted to, he could just all-out attack and actually remove the Vivian.
Yeah, he gives up a lot of resources to do so, I think. It'll be interesting to see what his decision is here.
Well, you trade 1-for-1 with the Jade Light Ranger and you lose a token to the Wild Growth Walker, but...
Benelish Marshall starting to make things look a lot more attractive on Andrew's side of the battlefield. All those Night tokens getting up to 3/3. Adanto Vanguard 4/2. Once it starts attacking, maybe opening up some new options.
Yeah, now you're getting to the point where it's pretty close as to whether or not you want to go after Vivian or go after them.
Right.
All depends probably on what Ellenbogen's follow-up is, though.
And I think it depends a lot on Will's hand as well. There's a lot of effective rebounds he can play on his next turn that would, really leave Andrew in a tight spot potentially. So Will's going to line up some blocks. Looks like he's going to eat a Night token, 2 Night tokens, while trading off his Jade Light Ranger here. And it looks like the attack was directed at Vivian Reed.
3 Knights at Vivian and the Adanto Vanguard at Will's face, which is a good attack.
Correct. So Will's going to fall to 14, untap for his next turn. Follow-up play, the Ravenous Chupacabra, Patrick Sullivan's all-time favorite card. Big impact on the battlefield there for sure. A body to block, as well as a removal spell. And we see Incubation Druid for the first time here on the battlefield. One of our new Ravnica Allegiance cards.
Yeah, Chupacabra is probably at the all-time best against this deck specifically, where you get to take out a creature and then very likely trade with something else. Sometimes it's just on chump block duty. The fact that it's a creature helps with finality. But in this case, it just trades straight up with History of Benalia, which is insane.
Right. And here we see a Johnny entering the battlefield on Andrew's behalf. He'll have to decide if he wants to make his army a little bit bigger or bring something back, and he's going to put counters on the Knight and the Adanto Vanguard, looking to beef up his already present creatures rather than find some new ones out of the graveyard.
Yeah, not a lot of great options for a Johnny's -2, and instead the plus allows Ellenbogen to actually defend this Johnny.
Uh-oh. I see a big follow-up in Will's hand. I think that's a 6-mana Vraska we're looking at. Not deploying yet, just going with Assassin's Trophy. Cleaning up that Ajani. That will put Andrew's 6th land in play. Not something the Azorius aggro deck is generally all that interested in. It's very happy with 3, maybe 4 lands. It would prefer if one of them came from Allegion's Landing. But a lot of mana on Andrew's side of the battlefield right now.
Yeah, and not too many ways to actually take advantage of it. No Banefires, no Experimental Frenzies, anything like that.
Right. So the turn passes back to Andrew. He's got to decide what he's going to do with this Knight token, that Adanta Vanguard. Looking a little ineffectual on his side of the battlefield right now. Joined by a Snubhorn Sentry. We do not have City's Blessing yet, correct?
One short.
One short. Oh, there we go. We have City's Blessing. Unfortunately, that puts the contents of Andrew Ellenbogen's hand on the table. And I don't think this lines up too well against what Will's offering right now. There you see Incubation Druid getting a little bit larger and adapting. Now unlocking both some more power and toughness as well as additional mana should Crassus show up and look for some fuel. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Jerry.
8.
Hydroid Crassus for 8.
X equals 8.
So Will draw 4 new cards and put an 8/8 onto the battlefield. How does that sound to you? Do you think that puts him in a good position?
And gains 4 life.
Oh, don't forget about the 4 life. Very important. Thank you. Yeah, Crassus is a house. It's a game changer for these decks, and I think you see exactly why right there. Andrew has his work cut out for him.
Consider that this is occupying the slot that used to be Carnage Tyrants, and Carnage Tyrant would be fine here, right? But Crassus goes so much further as far as stabilizing you and helping you close the game out.
Yeah, this is going to end the game much more cleanly than something like Carnage Tyrant would against a fairly crowded board. We saw a History of Benalia enter the battlefield for Andrew, trying to get wider again. Will's going to respond with a Merfolk Branchwalker, putting a Woodland Cemetery into his hand, making his Wildgrowth Walker even bigger, and buffing up his life total just a bit more. Let's see what his follow-up is here. He's got a ton of options, and I think this is going to be a big one. It is Vraska Relic Seeker, the 6-mana Planeswalker. That is a rough-looking battlefield for Andrew right now. I believe we plus the Vraska, adding some more bodies to the battlefield.
Why not?
Yeah. Here comes that 8/8 Crassus through the air, knocking Andrew down to 12. He needs some kind of miracle off the top of his deck right now. I don't even know if it exists, to be honest with you.
I don't think it does in the Azorius build of this deck. I do think that if you were playing Boros, you would have things like Experimental Frenzy and Banefire that could potentially like close games when you go long like this. Maybe not in this specific scenario, but if Frenzy showed up earlier, for example. And right now, Ellenbogen is just drawing off the top. Once the game gets to this point, there's really not a whole lot he can do.
Right. Andrew's deck is extremely powerful on a synergistic basis. Its cards combine really well to produce some really pronounced aggression, but on a card-for-card basis, there's no question that Will is pulling the better cards off the top of his deck, as you see with Hydroid Crassus into Vraska Relic Seeker. Some very dominant turns on his behalf.
Right, and Crassus draw 4 leads you to Vivian, which can find a Crassus, or just drawing another Crassus naturally. If your first one dies, you can use Find Finality to bring it back. Like, your engine is just online, and there's no stopping it.
Yeah, and it looks like after an Assassin's Trophy, Andrew Ellenbogen has seen enough, and that's going to do it. A victory for Will Pullium. Really impressive look there with the Sultai deck. I think that's everything we thought this deck would bring to the table today.
Absolutely. So does this mean that Will Pullium is now the PTGRN champion?
I do think that's how it works, yes. The title just passes along like that.
Do you think Ellenbogen brought his belt with him?
I hope so. You should always carry your championship belt with you at all times. If you ever watch wrestling, you always have your belt with you. You can sling it over your shoulder, you can put it